The rain is cold, relentless, and it has not stopped for 3 days. A Roman centurion, his bronze helmet dented, his red cloak heavy with water and mud, stumbles through the undergrowth. He cannot see his enemy. He cannot see his own men. All he hears is the wet thud of iron against flesh, the screaming of horses, and the guttural war cries echoing from every shadow. He raises his gladius to parry a blow that never comes. Instead, a spear takes him from the left, punching through his mail shirt and driving him to his knees. As his vision fades, his hand reaches out, grasping at the muddy earth, and he sees it. The silver eagle of the 19th Legion, toppling from its standard-bearer's hands and disappearing into the black mire. The eagle, the soul of Rome, is gone, and so too is Rome's illusion of invincibility. If you had asked any Roman, any senator, any general, or any merchant in the year 8 after Christ, they would have told you the same thing. Germania is finished. The tribes beyond the Rhine are either pacified, bribed, or too terrified to move. Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, has secured the borders of his vast empire. The legions are unchallenged. The barbarians, they said, were little more than savage animals who howled at the moon and fought with crude axes and rusted spears. What could they possibly do against the disciplined ranks of Roman steel? The answer, as history would prove, was everything. The man who would deliver that answer was not a wild chieftain with painted skin. He was a Roman citizen. He wore the purple-striped tunic of an equestrian officer. He spoke Latin with a cultured accent. He had fought alongside Roman legionaries, learned their tactics, and earned their trust. His name was Arminius, and he was the greatest psychological weapon Rome ever created, and the deadliest enemy it ever faced. Born into the Cherushi tribe, Arminius had been taken as a hostage in childhood and raised in Rome itself. He had served in the Roman army, studied its methods, and been granted full citizenship. To all appearances, he was a model client king, a living proof of Rome's civilizing mission. But in his heart, he burned with a single cold purpose: the destruction of the Roman presence in his homeland. The Roman commander in Germania was Publius Quinctilius Varus, a man of impeccable lineage but questionable competence. Varus was a political appointee, a governor and general who had risen through the ranks of administration rather than the crucible of war. He was intelligent, wealthy, and deeply respected in Rome. But he had one fatal flaw that Arminius had already identified and would ruthlessly exploit. He was arrogant. Varus genuinely believed that the Germanic tribes were Rome's willing subjects. He treated them as he treated the provincials of Syria, where he had previously served. He held court, issued decrees, and demanded tribute, all without understanding that the Germans did not see themselves as conquered. They saw themselves as hosts, waiting for the right moment to show their guests the door. In the summer of 9 AD, Varus was at his summer camp near the Weser River, surrounded by 3 legions, the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th. Together with auxiliary troops and camp followers, his force numbered roughly 20,000 men. This was not a massive army by Roman standards, but it was the largest concentration of military power in the region. Varus felt secure. He had Arminius at his side, advising him, translating and assuring him of the loyalty of every chieftain who bent the knee. But Arminius was already weaving his web. While Varus held his tribunals and dispensed Roman law, Arminius traveled secretly among the tribes. He visited the Bructeri, the Marsi, the Chatti, the Angrivari, and his own Cherushi. He did not call them to war openly. Instead, he spoke of unity, of a single chance, of a moment when the Roman legions would be vulnerable, stretched thin, and trapped. He told them about Varus's route back to the Rhine winter quarters. He told them about the narrow forest paths, the bogs that swallowed men whole, and the sudden storms that could turn a simple march into a nightmare. He did not command them. He simply pointed the way, and they followed. The trap began to close in early September. Varus received word of a local rebellion to the north, a distant fire that needed extinguishing. This, of course, was Arminius's fabrication, but Varus, always eager to project Roman authority, immediately altered his plans. Instead of taking the well-paved, open road to the Rhine, he decided to march his entire army through the dense, uncharted track known as the Saltus Teutoburgiensis, the Teutoburg Forest. He asked Arminius for advice, and Arminius, the loyal ally, confirmed that this route was faster and perfectly safe. Varus did not send scouts ahead in strength. He did not fortify his columns. He did not even issue extra rations for a difficult crossing. He simply ordered his men to march, loaded down with baggage, siege equipment, and the wives and children of the camp followers. The first day of the march was an ordeal, but not yet a battle. The forest of Teutoburg was ancient, oppressive, and almost impenetrable. The trees were so dense in places that the sky vanished completely. The ground was a patchwork of soft moss, hidden tree roots, and deep sucking bogs. The column stretched out for miles, a long winding serpent of men, oxen, and carts, struggling to drag their equipment over paths that quickly dissolved into mud. The legionaries, accustomed to the straight roads and fortified camps of the empire, cursed under their breath. The auxiliaries, men recruited from Gaul and other provinces, grew uneasy. They had heard the stories of the forest, the spirits, the wild beasts, and the men who lived in the shadows. On the second day, the rain began. It was a drenching horizontal downpour driven by a cold wind that chilled the Roman soldiers to the bone. Their shields grew heavy with water. Their bows lost their strings. The marching order disintegrated as carts stuck in the mud and men strained to free them. Varus, riding on horseback at the center of the column, looked around with annoyance but not alarm. He was a Roman general on a Roman road, even if that road was nothing more than a root-choked trail. He dismissed the growing sense of dread that crept into his officers' voices. He did not notice that Arminius had disappeared with a small escort to bring up the rear guard. He did not notice that the Germanic warriors who had been shadowing the column had suddenly multiplied. He did not notice the barricades of felled trees that now blocked the path ahead and the path behind. The ambush did not begin with a charge. It began with a single javelin thrown from the darkness, followed by 100 more. The first volley slammed into the marching column without warning, cutting down men and oxen alike. The legionaries, trained for set-piece battles on open ground, had no formation, no shields locked, and no room to maneuver. They were packed so tightly on the narrow path that they could barely raise their swords. They could not see their attackers. The Germans were everywhere and nowhere, darting between the trees, throwing spears and heavy stones, then melting back into the mist before the Romans could even identify their position. Varus ordered his men to form a defensive perimeter, but there was no open ground to form a proper camp. Every clearing was a trap, every slope a killing field. The legionaries hacked at the trees, desperately trying to clear space to deploy, but the forest was too thick, the rain too blinding, and the enemy too numerous. The Germans did not fight like civilized armies. They did not stand in ranks and exchange volleys. They fought in small bands, each led by a chieftain, each striking at isolated pockets of Roman resistance, cutting down the stragglers and then disappearing again into the green twilight of the trees. The first night was a horror. The exhausted Romans huddled in their sodden tents, listening to the howls of the Germans, the groans of the wounded, and the drumming of the rain. Varus, in his command tent, was now a desperate man. His arrogance had evaporated. He was surrounded, his army was bleeding, and his most trusted advisor was gone. He knew, with a sinking certainty, that Arminius had betrayed him, but knowing the truth did not help him find a way out. He resolved to break camp at dawn and press forward, hoping to reach the open plain that lay on the other side of the forest. Dawn brought more rain and more slaughter. The Germans had spent the night building new barricades and digging pits in the path. The Romans advanced, but every 100 yards cost them 100 lives. The men were starving, exhausted, and demoralized. Many had lost their shields. Others had thrown away their heavy armor to run faster. They were no longer a legion. They were a rabble of terrified, half-drowned animals, and the Germans were the hunters. On the third day, Varus made his fateful decision. He gathered his surviving officers and told them that escape was impossible. He drew his sword, and in a final act of misguided Roman honor, he fell on his own blade. His senior officers followed his example, preferring suicide to capture. The remaining legionaries, leaderless and surrounded, broke. They scattered into the woods trying to flee, but the Germans were everywhere. They hunted the Romans down one by one with spears, with swords, with axes, and with bare hands. They captured the eagle standards and hacked them to pieces. They mutilated the corpses in ritual sacrifice, nailing skulls to the trees as offerings to their gods. When the slaughter was finally over, 3 days after it had begun, the Teutoburg Forest was a graveyard. Over 16,000 Roman soldiers lay dead. The survivors numbered in the hundreds, men who had escaped the carnage and limped back to the Rhine, pale and shaking, carrying with them the first news of the catastrophe. The 3 legions, the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th, had ceased to exist. They were never reformed, their numbers struck from the legions' rolls in eternal disgrace. The eagles were lost, and with them, the soul of Roman military pride. The consequences of Teutoburg rippled across the ancient world with seismic force. In Rome, the Emperor Augustus, now an old man, received the news in a state of profound shock. He tore his robes and wandered the halls of his palace, crying aloud, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions!" It was the cry of a man who had spent 40 years building an empire, only to watch it crumble in a single stroke. He never fully recovered from the blow. He would sit in his chambers, beating his head against the doorposts, muttering the name of Varus over and over. But the greatest consequence was strategic. Augustus immediately abandoned all plans for further conquest beyond the Rhine. The frontier was pulled back to the river, and a massive investment in fortifications began. The Rhine became a permanent defensive boundary, a wall of water and garrisoned camps that separated the Roman world from the Germanic wilderness. The dream of a Roman province of Germania Magna, stretching to the Elbe, died in the mud of Teutoburg. The empire consolidated, retrenched, and gave up on expansion in the north. In the longer run, the defeat changed the course of European history. Because Rome never conquered Germania, the tribes across the Rhine remained independent, culturally distinct, and heavily militarized. They became the buffer and later the gravediggers of the Western Roman Empire. The linguistic and cultural division of Europe, the Romance-speaking South and the Germanic-speaking North, was effectively sealed by the disaster of 9 AD. The forest became a border that held for over 4 centuries. And what of Arminius? The man who engineered the greatest Roman defeat in a generation did not live to enjoy a peaceful triumph. He continued to fight, both against the Romans and against rival Germanic chieftains. He was assassinated in 21 AD, poisoned by members of his own family who feared his growing power. He was never crowned king. He never built a lasting kingdom. His legacy was destruction, not creation. Yet his name lived on as a symbol, not as a Roman ally, but as a German hero. Centuries later, during the rise of nationalism, Arminius would be reimagined as Hermann the Liberator, a figure of defiance against foreign domination. But the lesson of Teutoburg is not about Arminius, and it is not about Germanic bravery. It is about the hubris of a mighty power that believed its own propaganda. Varus did not lose because his men were weak. He lost because he assumed that superior civilization always defeated primitive resistance. He assumed that the natives were too simple to organize, too fragmented to unite, and too grateful for Roman order to ever strike back. He treated intelligence as loyalty, silence as consent, and terrain as an inconvenience rather than a weapon. He was not defeated by a larger army. He was defeated by his own arrogance, his own impatience, and his own refusal to listen to the quiet voices of caution that the forest whispered to him, day after day. The name of Arminius faded from Roman memory, but the name of Varus became a byword for catastrophic overreach.